Welcome back to Marvel Maniac, an MCU Aftershow. This is your host, Eric Cicada, aka Mr. Honest, and it is the dawn of a new year, which some would say is a little bit nerve-wracking. You make promises to yourself, you set New Year's resolutions, you look back at the year you just had. Sometimes you're a little judgmental of yourself, overly judgmental. Sometimes you're like, wow, this was a pretty extraordinary year. For me, it was an awesome year. It was a year I learned how to make content again. It was a year where I delved deeply into the podcast that I love and created nearly 5 years ago, which does blow my mind. The fact is, the podcast has been running consistently longer than it ever has. It had a few runs when I started it, when I fell off into a mental health issue, which I go through for episode 200, I believe. We talk about that, so you should go back and listen if you're interested in why I stopped and started the podcast a few times before this definitive run, in my opinion. However, since we're counting down to 2026 together, I figured I would count down with you my top favorite MCU solo films. Now, when I say solo films, that means individual franchise, spreading out to Guardians of the Galaxy being its own solo film because they are a unit in that of themselves. Maybe not like in current MCU. Things have separated. We don't know where that's going with Star-Lord right now. However, this version of this list is allowed to have a group that kind of brings in their own story and twists into the MCU, kind of a solo story instead of a solo character movie, but it has the same essence. So we're going to go down 10 to 1. I do have my favorite picked out, and for me, it's a no-brainer. You might know it, but I won't say it until the end. And this is going to be a tough list, and that will make this list definitive and good. Now, I would love for you to, in contrast, email me or post it on our Patreon, link in the description, your top 10 favorite MCU solo films. And I want to go over them in another future episode, hopefully, ideally, in the next few weeks. Depends on how many responses I get. It's a fun sit-down kind of brain worker if you're a big fan of the MCU, because there are a lot of great solo movies. So without further ado, let's get started. So kicking off this list, at number 10, I've got Ant-Man. And I want to be really clear right away that this is not me saying Ant-Man is a bad movie. Actually, it's the opposite. See, the reason it lands at number 10 is because this list is stacked, like ridiculously stacked, and Ant-Man just barely makes the cut. What I love about Ant-Man is that it's fun, it's light, and it doesn't try to be anything that it's not. Paul Rudd, perfect in the role. The humor works, the heart is there, and it gives us a totally different side of the MCU. Coming in right after Age of Ultron in 2015, this was the perfect cool-down movie and the perfect introduction to a new hero, lighthearted and fun. But when I stack it up against the rest of these movies, it doesn't hit me emotionally the same way. It doesn't reshape the MCU, and it doesn't redefine a character arc. It doesn't carry the same weight as the ones higher on this list. And that's okay, because being number 10 on this list does not mean it's weak. It means that it survived. It made it into a group of movies that I genuinely love, and honestly, that says a lot. I might cover it again on the podcast soon. All right, so coming in at number 9, and this one was honestly really tough, I've got Shang-Chi. And the reason why I say it's tough is because Shang-Chi is a great movie. It's one of the strongest introductions of a brand new hero that Marvel has ever done, especially in the multiverse saga. The action is incredible. The choreography is insane. The visuals are beautiful, and emotional weight that comes with this movie, it actually really, really works. The reason I'm putting it at number 9 isn't because it's weak, like any movie on this list, really. Not weak to me. Top tier. It's because it still feels unfinished to me. Shang-Chi is such a strong character, and there's clearly so much more story left to tell. And I think once we see where he goes in the MCU, this movie is going to hit even harder in hindsight. Right now, it feels like the beginning of something really special, but not the full picture yet. And I think that's why it lands here. I love it. I respect it. I want more of them, more Shang-Chi's. And I just want more in general. I want to see him in the Avengers and see how that plays out. I think we're going to eventually get that, and I'm pretty sure he is queued to be in Doomsday. So we are going to see more of that story coming sooner than later, ideally. All right, so this next one I want to be really careful with, because coming in at number 8 for me is Black Panther. And I want to be clear right away that this has nothing to do with the importance of this movie. Black Panther is one of the most culturally impactful films the MCU has ever made. Chadwick Boseman's performance was powerful, dignified, and absolutely iconic. He brought something to the MCU that went way beyond superhero movies, and his legacy still matters a lot and always will. The reason it's at my number 8 on this list is purely personal. When I look at these movies, I'm ranking them based on how deeply I connected to them, how often I revisit them, and how they hit me emotionally at certain times of my life. And for me, Black Panther is a movie I deeply respect more than one I personally return to all the time. That doesn't take away from what it meant, what it represented, or what Chadwick brought to the role. If anything, it's a reminder of how important that this movie was and how much potential there still was before we lost him far too soon. I would have loved to see him in that sequel. So this placement isn't about quality or legacy. It's just about where it lands for me on this list. Again, MarvelManiacPod@gmail.com. Send me your list. I'm dying to know. All right, so coming in at number 7 for me is Thor Ragnarok. And I know this one might surprise some people because a lot of fans have this way higher on their list. And don't get me wrong, I love this movie. It's fun, it's wild, it's colorful, and it's completely reinventing Thor and his character. This is the movie that finally figures out who Thor is supposed to be in the MCU, and that alone makes it incredibly important. Ragnarok also does something really smart. Along with Taika Waititi as the director, it changes the tone of Thor's entire world. The humor lands, the soundtrack is iconic, the visuals are insane, and the introduction of Hela is honestly one of the coolest villain entrances in the franchise. Cate Blanchett is fantastic, and I actually wish they hadn't gotten rid of her so quickly, because I think she really could have been a really compelling long-term threat, even to like an Avengers level threat at some point. Maybe she's not fully dead. You know, anyone could come back in one way or another. All you need is to snap the Infinity Stones, or there's some weird ritual you can go do with Mephisto somewhere. Anyways, for me, the reason Thor Ragnarok lands at number 7 is because while I love it, it does feel more like a reinvention than a complete emotional journey. This sets the stage for Infinity War in a huge way, and Thor's arc really peaks there for me. But this movie is the bridge that gets him there. So yeah, Ragnarok is a blast. It's a turning point for Thor, and it gives the character new life. And it's endlessly rewatchable. All right, this is where it starts getting really hard for me. I think for number 6, I'm going to go with Captain America, the First Avenger. And I want to say this clearly. I love this movie. I think it's underrated, and I think it's incredibly important. And honestly, it's one of my comfort watches in the entire MCU. This movie does something really special. It tells a complete story. You get the origin, you get the struggle, you get the heart, and you get the sacrifice. Steve Rogers starts out as a skinny kid who just wants to do the right thing. And by the end of the movie, he's a hero who gives up everything, including the life he wanted, to save everyone else. I love the tone of this movie. I love the period setting. I love Red Skull as a villain. I love how it introduces Hydra, which ends up becoming one of the most important threads in the entire MCU. And I love how it sets up Steve's journey moving forward, and the beginning of a love story that spans 70 years, wishing and wanting that last dance with Peggy Carter. There's something very emotional that comes up in me when I see that scene where they're saying their final goodbyes and he's about to crash. The reason I'm putting it here instead of higher isn't because it's weak. It's because Captain America, for me, becomes even stronger when he's interacting with the Avengers. That's where his character really shines, in my opinion. But this movie in particular, this is the foundation. And if this movie didn't work, none of the Captain America story that we love right now would exist. So yeah, number 6, Captain America, the First Avenger. All right, this is where it starts getting really hard for me. Coming in at number 5, I'm putting Black Widow. And honestly, I feel like this movie doesn't get nearly enough credit. Natasha deserved a solo film way earlier in the MCU. And even though this one came later and ended up being a prequel, I actually think that works in its favor. Because what this movie does really well is give us something we never fully got before. Natasha's life outside the Avengers. We finally get to see where she came from, what shaped her, and what she's been carrying this whole time. The family dynamic is one of my favorite parts of the movie. Yelena, Alexei, Melina, they all bring something real to the story. Florence Pugh and David Harbour in particular are incredible, and they do a great job at carrying Natasha's legacy forward. I also really like the way this movie revisits Dreykov's daughter. That line from the first Avengers, "You've got red in your ledger," actually comes full circle here. And I thought that this was handled in a really interesting way. Even the Taskmaster twist, which I know some people didn't love, it worked for me emotionally. This movie adds depth to Natasha in a way that makes her scenes in the earlier films hit harder on a rewatch. You understand her better, you understand what she lost, and why she is the way she is. So for me, Black Widow lands at number 5, not because it's perfect, but because it adds something really meaningful to the MCU, and it gives a character the closure that she deserved. All right, so coming in at number 4 for me is Spider-Man Homecoming. And I love this movie. I think it did something incredibly important for the MCU, which is finally getting Spider-Man right. This wasn't just another origin story. This was Spider-Man being dropped into a bigger world and having to figure out who he is inside of it. He's not a lone hero yet. He's not fully formed. He's a kid with a suit and a lot of potential. And also Tony Stark's watching over him. And I actually love that dynamic. The mentor relationship between Peter and Tony adds so much weight to this movie. And it gives Spider-Man a really unique place in the MCU. He's not just another superhero. He's learning how to be one in real time. I also think that this movie absolutely nailed the tone. It's fun, it's light, it feels like high school. And Tom Holland was the perfect choice. If this movie didn't work, Spider-Man's entire future in the MCU would have been in trouble. The reason it lands at number 4 for me is simply because, as great as it is, Spider-Man is a character people are always going to show up for. The movies above it had to work a little harder to win people over and carve out their place in the MCU. Homecoming is fantastic. It just happens to be competing with some truly special films. All right, so coming in at number 3 for me is Doctor Strange. And this is a movie that completely pulled me in from the first time I saw it. I went into it not knowing much about the character at all. I just knew Benedict Cumberbatch from Sherlock, and I already trusted him as an actor. And man, he absolutely delivered. What I love about this movie is how much time it gives its story. You feel Strange's journey from arrogance to loss to obsession to growth. This movie doesn't rush his transformation, and that's what makes it work. You can tell a lot of time passes, even if the movie doesn't spell it out for you. And then there's the magic, the visuals, the mirror dimension, the way reality folds in on itself. It was unlike anything we'd seen in the MCU up to that point. Seeing it in theaters, especially in 3D, was insane. It felt like the MCU opening a door into something much bigger. The Dormammu scene is still one of my favorites in the entire franchise. The fact that Strange doesn't win with strength, but with his intelligence and persistence, tells you everything you need to know about who he is. He literally outsmarts a god by looping time. That's such a cool character defining moment, honestly. And this movie sets up so much of what comes later. The Time Stone, the multiverse, Strange's role in Infinity War and beyond. He becomes one of the most important characters in the MCU, and it all starts right here. Doctor Strange is creative, trippy, ambitious, and endlessly rewatchable. It's one of those movies I can throw on at any time and get completely pulled into. All right, so coming in at number 2 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy. And honestly, this one was never really in question. Guardians was a massive swing for Marvel. At the time, this was easily their riskiest move. These weren't household names. Most people had no idea who these characters were. And yet somehow, James Gunn made it work in a way that completely changed the MCU. This movie feels like Marvel's first true step into the cosmic side of the universe. It introduces characters from all over the galaxy, and it expands the scope of what the MCU could be. And it gives us our first real look at the larger forces at play, especially Thanos. Seeing him on that throne for the first time, even briefly, made everything feel bigger. It planted the idea that there was something coming, even if we didn't know what yet. And then you have the characters themselves, Star-Lord, Gamora, Rocket, Groot, Drax, all of them completely different, all of them broken in their own way, and somehow they just work together. The chemistry is incredible. What I love most about Guardians is that it doesn't feel like a traditional superhero movie. It feels like a space adventure with heart. It's funny, emotional, weird, and surprisingly sincere. And by the end of it, you care about every single one of these characters. This movie laid the emotional groundwork for Infinity War in a huge way, especially through Gamora and her connection to Thanos. Without Guardians, that story doesn't hit nearly as hard. It's bold, it's different, and it's one of the most important Marvel movies ever made, which is why it lands at number 2 for me. And that brings me to number 1. And honestly, if you've been listening to this list, this probably isn't a surprise. My number 1 MCU solo movie is Iron Man. The movie is the foundation for everything, not just the MCU, but the entire idea that this kind of shared universe could even work. When Iron Man came out, this wasn't guaranteed. This wasn't a safe bet, and it was actually a huge risk. Jon Favreau directing, Robert Downey Jr. making a major comeback as an actor. You're talking about a movie centered around a character that at the time wasn't even close to being a household name. And instead of going cosmic or mystical, they grounded it. They told us a story about a flawed, arrogant weapons manufacturer who has to confront the consequences of his own creations. Tony Stark doesn't become a hero because he wants to. He becomes one because he's forced to look at himself. He's humbled, he's captured, he realizes his technology is being used to hurt people, innocent people. And instead of running from that, he builds something better. That cave scene with Yinsen is still one of the most powerful origin moments in the entire MCU. The idea of building the first suit out of scraps, literally on the edge of death, is what defines Tony Stark as a character. Everything that comes after, every upgrade, every sacrifice, it starts right there. And what makes this movie even better is how human it feels. The tech feels real. The mistakes feel real. Tony feels real. Even Obadiah Stane works so well as a villain because he represents the darker path Tony could have stayed on. This movie doesn't waste time. It moves. It's confident. It's funny. It has heart. And somehow, even watching it now, it still holds up. The effects, the pacing, and the storytelling, it all works. And then there's that ending. I am Iron Man. That line didn't just end a movie. It started everything. The Avengers Initiative, S.H.I.E.L.D., the entire MCU, a decade-long story that would eventually lead to Tony Stark saving the whole universe. Looking back now, knowing where his journey ends, this movie hits even harder. It's the beginning of one of the greatest character arcs in superhero film history. Iron Man isn't just my number 1 solo MCU movie. It's the reason this list exists at all. So, number 10, Ant-Man. Number 9, Shang-Chi. 8, Black Panther. 7, Thor Ragnarok. 6, Captain America the First Avenger. 5, Black Widow. 4, Spider-Man Homecoming. 3, Doctor Strange. 2, Guardians of the Galaxy. And number 1, Iron Man. So that's my list. From number 10 all the way up to number 1, that's how I'd rank my favorite MCU solo movies right now. And honestly, that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. But that's the kind of beauty that lies inside of it. The MCU has grown so much over the years that even putting together a list like this feels meaningful. These movies came out at different times in my life, meant different things to me when I saw them, and still hit differently on rewatch. If you agree with my list, awesome. If you don't, that's even better. That's what makes this stuff fun to talk about. I genuinely would love to hear how you would rank yours. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow the show, leave a rating or a review. This really does help more than you think. And if you want to support the podcast directly, you can check out patreon.com/MarvelManiac. Check out our mini-sodes that we've been doing for months. It's very fun over there. Or hit the link in the description for everything else I'm working on. We've got a lot coming in the new year. More episodes, more deep dives, and a lot of exciting Marvel stuff on the horizon. 2026 is shaping up to be a really fun year for Marvel, ending with Doomsday. I had to say it. and I am so excited to experience it all with you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking around, and I hope you have a safe, happy new year. And until next time, Avengers, disassemble.